So this week on Primus, I've mostly been trying to make the game feel cleaner, not necessarily by adding massive new features, not by necessarily building a massive new mode, but just more so trying to actually take the things that do exist and make them fit more properly. Because I think that's one of the weird stages with the game I'm at now. A lot of the individual pieces are starting to exist. There's combat, there's the arena, there's the festivals, there's the Ludus hub, the house system, etc. But part of it is being able to actually show it all properly. Part of it is being able to actually get it all clean and working the way it should. Because for the demo, I don't need the entire game finished, right? And for reference, I think I'm about like 3 weeks out from looking to apply to submit my demo, because with the Steam Fest at mid-June, I do want to get that out in front, and I've obviously applied for that, so that should be quite good. But I think, sometimes I sort of look at, the game and I go, right, well, I could do with working on the HUD for the game, because the old HUD for Primus wasn't necessarily bad, but it did take up quite a bit of space. Now, one of the things I had been doing is I had been looking at Darkest Dungeon, because what Darkest Dungeon does with their HUD is very nice. It's all very compact, and when you're changing panels, especially in the little sort of like location area, it all smoothly works. It all feels very, very nice, and it's the sort of thing where I'll go and look at screenshots of the game. I'll even go and play the game and make some notes in the notepad next to me in terms of, well, what does it do? And the cool thing with the whole AI game development stuff is that as long as I can get an understanding of, how did it look like it works, right? How does it feel? As long as I can describe it well enough to AI, as far as my 900 plus hours of AI game development, I'm yet to see AI not be able to achieve what I can describe it to do. So that's obviously the really cool thing. And I think with at least the management, like the whole management style game that I'm making, especially when there's multiple systems running in the background, clarity really matters, right? The player needs to know what matters right now. They need to know what rank they are, the condition their house is in, the options they have. And if the UI is too messy, then it makes the whole game feel far more complicated than it actually is. And really, I think the goal of the HUD is pretty much to basically strip down a bit and make everything feel so much more intentional, more compact, more readable. I think that's really helped quite a lot. It's one of those sort of changes that doesn't really sound very exciting when you say it, such as, oh, I made the HUD a lot smaller. But it actually does change how the game feels. I know with at least Scarred Steel, for example, that was something which honestly speaking, the HUD is pretty shocking. Looking back at it, I mean, yeah, sure, it was my first game, but like a lot of the HUD, at least even for the map, was so crowded and chaotic, in my opinion, or at least it could have been a lot cleaner, that it does make me reflect on wanting to make Primus so much better. Right, and at least for the game with Primus, like I want there to be a wider world around the arena. I want the other houses and factions to feel like they're doing things, right? Maybe they're trading, maybe they're, fighting each other, maybe they're sabotaging each other, etc. And I want the player to feel like they're part of, a political system, not just necessarily doing a straight climb to a leaderboard in isolation. So I've been sort of thinking about how rivals could interact with each other, right? Perhaps they could form alliances, maybe they betray one another, maybe one faction sponsors you as a way of being able to take down or knock another faction down a few ranks. And maybe a stronger house sees you as useful because you're low ranked, and they can use that to their advantage, that sort of thing. So instead of the player just thinking, how do I win the next fight, they could also think, well, who am I helping by winning this fight? Who am I annoying? Who am I benefiting? And that sort of thing. And, I think this is sort of where, it would be cool if we had like a rival activity feed, where as time passes, you can see what's going on. Games like Mount and Blade Bannerlord 2, which I've been playing quite a bit lately, you're always able to see what's going on. There's nobles fighting, there's, people marrying, there's people getting taken prisoner, etc. Like there's so much going on, but it makes you feel like you are just part of such a bigger world. I think that's part of what I want to be able to replicate with Primus. So that's obviously been a big focus. And I think, at first with Primus, I did have an idea of making a dungeon crawler type of thing, similar to Darkest Dungeon. But the more I've worked on it, the less I feel like it fits, at least for this game. I just don't really think Dungeon Crawler really works with the Gladiator idea, and if anything, it's becoming more of a Gladiator simulator, which I don't have an issue with. And also with this game, I do want to try and make it a little more historically accurate. You know, things such as the festival, the arena, the houses. I want to try and move toward this gladiator simulation idea that actually feels slightly more realistic. And I think, that direction feels a bit more interesting rather than having to force, a dungeon crawler system just because it was part of an older idea. And that's what I'm finding, and that's what's nice with doing these projects with AI. If there is a shift in the feeling of how the game is, you don't need to worry about learning loads of new things. You can simply just adjust the trajectory of the project. Because I think sometimes the idea you start with isn't necessarily the best version of the game. Sometimes, you have to work on it for a while before the shape of the game actually becomes clear, and that's sort of what's happening with Primus. So that's pretty much where we're at. I think the reality is that moving forward, we're going to be focusing on a few things. The main things being the upcoming demo stage, right? What do I have in that and what do I include? Likelihood is, here's what we'll do. We'll go from, the player will start at rank 100, the goal will be to go to ranked 1. And they'll be taking invitations to perform at festivals in order to rank themselves up. The idea, like all the other factions, will be at varying different ranks as well, and you'll obviously have to manage that as you go. But I think what I will want to do is for the demo, we'll probably have it go from rank 100 to rank 80, where maybe you fight like 2 gatekeeper bosses or something at rank 90 and rank 80. As a way of being able to progress through, because that would obviously help with the project scope. But again, there's still a lot of the game which I'm still very grey about in terms of what's going to go on. So I think that's pretty much what I'm going to be focusing on for the upcoming weeks. Now, again, pretty much 3 weeks until I'm going to be looking to ideally submit for the demo. But it's going to be very interesting, and obviously for Scarred Steel, I obviously was able to use the Steam Fest to help that game, and we're also going to get the Steam Fest to help Primus as well. So it's all coming very nicely timed. I didn't think I was going to be able to get a Steam Fest for Primus, but we have, so that is cool. And honestly, anything more than what I've currently got is cool. I think at the time of recording, I've got like 9 wish lists for Primus. So yeah, the Steam Fest would definitely help. But other than that, it is just going to be working on that. Obviously, if you are interested in Primus, then feel free to give it a wish list. That would really help. And yeah, I'll keep you in the loop for how the sort of, the demo comes out. And yeah, I mean, if anyone's got any feedback, I'd be more than happy to hear it. I do have my Discord as well, which you can sort of look along for and reach out to me on. But other than that, I'm going to be keeping at it, and I'll let you know how things go.